At number 10, we have Felix Faust. Although he's more of a classic character that might come off a bit campy, I think he still deserves a spot on the list. One of the reasons for that is that Faust would be a perfect candidate for the DCEU to explore the world of magic that exists in the comics, considering his power set. Felix Faust is able to access certain magical powers through his demonic familiars, giving him telepathy, summoning the dead, illusions, and much more. This could offer DC a way to cash in on the interest that the public clearly has for magic powers after the success of Doctor Strange and Scarlet Witch in the Marvel Universe, although in this case the character would be a villain. And despite the fact that he looks kind of cartoonish, we've seen comic adaptations modernize, or cinemify if you will, crazier characters before. At number 9 is Prometheus. What's unique about this entry is that Prometheus doesn't actually have any superpowers, which could be a cool opportunity for DC to explore the human side of a villain, like Marvel did with Thanos, for instance, which I think worked really well. And honestly, for a human character only using armor and technology to get as powerful as Prometheus does, he would be a very interesting DCEU character to see how he gets to that point of power and how he is capable of taking on the Justice League head to head. With his super advanced computerized helmet, he's able to download knowledge such as fighting styles and much more into his mind and learn new skills immediately. And this allows the character to grow in power exponentially, which offers for a cool arc in, say, a long-running TV series perhaps. I also just think Prometheus looks so cool that he needs to be featured in a live-action setting.
Number 8. Justice Lord Superman. Coming from the animated universe, the 2003 Justice League episode titled A Better World showed us one that's rather the opposite. This parallel universe showed Kal-El and the Justice Lord storming the White House after President Lex Luthor had just executed the Flash. Now the team of course wasn't too happy, so Batman and Wonder Woman fought off the Secret Service while Superman told Luthor that he's taken him in. Lex is insane, so he had a button ready that could literally start a nuclear war if it was pressed. And he's threatening Superman, saying that he needs to use deadly force if he wants to save the people. So Superman's like, okay, and then just eyes glow red, and then he turns them into ashes, just like that. And when Batman and Wonder Woman come back in, it's far too late. Superman just has a smile on his face, and Lex is just a pile of dust. Good times. After this, for the next 2 years, the Justice Lords would rule using violence like it was normal. They saw this and they're like, well, that certainly did the trick. Let's just keep doing that. Justice Lord Superman used his heat vision to wipe out all of Earth's criminals and villains. If we had him in the DCEU, the movie would be a lot shorter than 4 hours. It would be like 36 minutes. Snyder cut, maybe 44 minutes. Number 7. Superboy Prime. Another super menace. First appearing in DC Comics Presents issue 87, this version of Supes has more powers and less weaknesses. I'm talking immunity to kryptonite and magic, which is a fantastic combo. He arrived to Earth and was soon discovered by Jerry and Naomi Kent while they were on a hike in a New England seacoast town. They named him Clark, although Clark Kent was the name of a popular comic book hero named Superman. So yeah, Superman already existed on this Earth, so Clark grew up and later attended a costume party at a beach and dressed like Superman. He went to get a glimpse of Halley's Comet and it was all a good time, and then all of a sudden a tidal wave hits, this portal opens up, and the Superman from the comics pops out. Now at the same time, young Clark's powers manifested and he quickly learned what to do with them in the moment. Superboy then followed that Superman back into the portal to an alternate reality, and he would never be the same again. Crisis on Infinite Earths was this multiversal catastrophe where parallel dimensions were being consumed by the Anti-Monitor, who I'll talk about later. Superboy dove in, joined the fight, but was unable to prevent the destruction of his Earth. So Superboy Prime and other survivors escaped to a paradise dimension that Alexander Luthor Jr. offered. Using crystals, Superboy just relived happy times in this paradise, but eventually he got frustrated and shattered the barrier of reality. He literally punched everything apart. He retconned quite a bit in DC continuity. For example, he brought back Jason Todd, he combined Superman's origins, Doom Patrol was now rebooted, and we had numerous incarnations of Hawkman and the League of Superheroes. I feel like DC could use a big bad Superboy Prime punch to clear up the timeline, but hopefully the Flash movie does that, because this guy is just a little too crazy. Number 6. Brainiac. Another close rival of Superman's, Brainiac made his first appearance in Action Comics 242. This guy right off the bat is a very specific villain. He would love to steal cities. Yeah, watch out for your cities, keep them safe, put them under your mattress. He took Metropolis at one point. This guy's wild. He would use his shrinking ray, zoom, shrink your city, and then take them back to his planet. Vril Doc started his days as a scientist, and one day he successfully cloned himself because he needed an assistant, so who better to hire than yourself? He built the spaceship next and traveled to the cosmos, gaining knowledge and studying alien organisms with the help of his robot drones, and during these travels he came across Krypton while General Zod was still running the show. So of course, this dude shrunk down the entire city of Kandor and studied it in his ship. He made a remote scout unit that believed it was the original real Docs, and then it traveled to Earth and took over the body of sideshow mentalist Milton Fine, whose stage name was Brainiac. Now it makes sense. Number 5, Necron. Also known as the Lord of the Unliving. Great. Necron made his first appearance in Tales of the Green Lantern Corps issue 2. He's literally the embodiment of death. Necron figured out the land of the living existed after the death of an immortal caused a rift to open between dimensions. So Necron saw all this life and he was like, this looks tasty. He wanted it. Well, really he wanted to master it and get out of his hell, his literal hell that he was living in. So he resurrected Krona, even throwing in a classy army of the dead to assist in taking down the Guardians of the Universe. Taking them down ended up widening the rift, so it took all the Green Lantern Corps to stop them, but even after winning, countless lives were lost in this fight. Hal Jordan ended up going to the land of the unliving, accepting the possibility that he may just never return, and there he gathered the souls of other fallen lanterns, and it was just enough to fight off Necron and return, with the Guardians sealing the rift promptly afterwards. But like Necron says, you can never defeat death. Back in 2009, it was revealed Necron was behind the Black Lanterns and instigated the Blackest Night event. There he took over the bodies of Wonder Woman and Superman while also bringing back dead heroes to join his side. Number 4, Prometheus. Helmets are pretty important, especially in combat, and especially if one helmet in particular gave you the skills to beat, I don't know, Batman. Prometheus first appeared in New Year's Evil, Prometheus issue 1 back in the late 90s, and at first he was just the son of two criminals who traveled across the US, real Bonnie and Clyde style. But as a kid he would have to go with them, right, because they couldn't afford a babysitter. They were rich with like mob money, but they couldn't afford a babysitter. Okay, so eventually the police caught on and they were never seen again. The police killed them in front of the boy, almost like a darker Bruce Wayne origin. So he grew up with their fortune, only it was a stolen fortune. Then he traveled the world, trained as a fighter, trained as a mercenary. He learned a dozen different languages and he was pretty skilled by the end of it. Then he found the ancient city of Shambhala where their monks studied evil. They trusted him and showed him their greatest treasure, which was an alien ship. Not too bad. Their leader was actually an alien in disguise. He landed there, but Prometheus had to kill him to obtain the key to enter the Ghost Zone. The Ghost Zone was this infinite expanse of white emptiness, the space between dimensions. Kryptonians called this the Phantom Zone. And in there, Prometheus built himself a house, a costume, and his first advanced helmet that downloads info to take on the Justice League. He was great, like he shot Martian Manhunter so then he couldn't change, he infected Steel's armor with a virus, he hypnotized Huntress, and he hit Green Lantern with a neural shaft so his ring was useless. He also trapped Zuriel in said Ghost Zone and beat Batman with hand-to-hand combat. Not too shabby at all. Number 3, the Batman who laughs. We've seen quite a few Batman on screen. We're even seeing Michael Keaton return to Gotham in the next Flash movie, which is pretty exciting. But the Batman who laughs, aka the Darkest Night, might be a bit too hardcore for the theaters. Coming from the Dark Multiverse, first appearing in Dark Days The Casting, created by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo, comes a twisted Earth 22 version of the Batman who laughs. The Joker here is insane. He goes on this spree throughout Gotham, just chaos in the streets. He took out Jim Gordon, then he poisoned Batman. It was all bad, and then once Batman was able to move again after the poison had run its course, he broke the Joker's neck, which is already immediately so dark. But even the Joker was prepared after death. After that snap, he let out this toxic breath that let everybody near him get infected, including Batman. Cut to 2 days later, Batman and Superman are talking about what happened, and when Superman tells Bruce that a kid infected by Joker bit a doctor, Bruce ends up laughing, like this maniacal laugh. And he catches himself after, he's like, sorry about that. Superman knows something's off here, but a day later, Bruce called the team to the Batcave and went full on Omni-Man. He took out the entire team before anybody caught on to his new and violent personality. Number 2, the Anti-Monitor. Making his first appearance in Crisis on Infinite Earths issue 2, the Anti-Monitor was DC's excuse to cut out a lot of fat from the comics, basically. The multiverse was introduced back in the 60s. The Golden Age heroes were residing on Earth 2, and then came Earth 3, and then so on and danforth. So when Crisis on Infinite Earths came around, DC Comics introduced this big bad cosmic villain to set something straight going forward. Clean up the multiple timelines, makes sense. Now it all started when Krona performed this experiment. They wanted to see the origin of the universe, but instead an opposite universe universe was created, the Antimatter universe. Anti-Monitor wanted nothing but death and destruction, and after battling his brother for, say, I don't know, a billion years, they both fell unconscious. And then 9 billion years later, they were woken up. When they tried to destroy Earth 1, many heroes lost their lives, and in order to stop that chaos, Superman had to punch them into a star. Who knows, with the Flash opening up the multiversal door, we could see him on the big screen in our lifetime. Maybe. And finally, number 1, Perpetua. Of course, one of the most feared beings in the greater Omniverse. Also known as the First Creator, she made her first appearance in Justice League Volume 4, Issue 8. She was the mother of the Monitor, Anti-Monitor, and World Folder. She was actually one of the hands that created the multiverse, literally. Each member were these celestial beings, and they would pass on, and their energy would return to the source, but Perpetua was different. She wanted a dark, vicious reality that would live forever. So she created the first iteration of the multiverse using negative crisis energies, and then had 3 cosmic children. She was creating an army also to rule over the multiverse, so her children snitched. Yeah, they told the judges of the source, and Perpetua was locked away outside the source wall with her negative energies. But even locked away, she was able to connect to Lex Luthor, who believed freeing her would make him a hero on some multiversal scale. So next time you want to kick somebody out of your party, just banish them to the source wall with their negative energy. That's how he works. Kicking off the list at number 10, Silver Banshee. First appearing in Action Comics 595, and in usual comic book fashion, she's immediately catcalled by some gross dudes. She literally looks like a demon, and the guy in the middle is like, tall broads, I love them. She proceeds to choke the life out of him because she has this fancy ability where one touch is all it takes to kill you. Neat. Heads up 7-Up would be an extreme sport with Siobhan. So she keeps on walking, she continues to a bookstore, of course killing another dude by, palming his head for a hot second. People run out of the store and they're talking about her voice, how it's the weirdest sound that they've ever heard. See, it's not her touch that kills, it's her voice. See, in IMAX, this would just be a treat. Just a woman screaming into the camera for 4 hours. I'll take it, debit. She's not to be messed with. She straight up killed Superman in her first comic book appearance. This is why you try and avoid curses when you're a child, or else you turn into a Silver Banshee and then in turn you have no friends, which is no fun. Number 9, Knockout. First appearing in comics with Superboy Volume 4, Knockout was a dancer working at a club called the Boom Boom Room. It's clear right off the bat that she possesses super strength. But she was having fun at this club. She saw Superboy on TV and thought that he was a little cutie. In fact, she actually doesn't believe that Superboy has ever met a girl like her in his life. And she's probably right. She fought Superboy a bit because she was into it, but later on she was much more of a threat when she joined the Suicide Squad for missions against the crime cartel Silicon Dragons. Once issue 2 rolls around, flirting turns into something pretty serious. She's fighting Superboy and she says that she's glad that she lives here now. Here, so where did she used to live? Well, she used to live in Apocalypse. Fun fact, she was also one of Granny Goodness's female Furies, but after Big Barda left with Mr. Miracle, she too decided that she wanted out. And she was punished for this, of course, so she got chained up to the walls of the fire pits, but eventually she broke free. The second she broke free, she leaped into the fire, and then she was transported via boom tube to Hawaii.
Number 8, Mr. Freeze. Mr. Freeze is Victor Freeze, a vastly underrated Batman villain in my opinion, but admittedly a hard villain to bring to the big screen, though maybe not as hard to bring to the big screen as Condiment King. And that's not just because of his overall look and character design, but because of how capable he can be and how powerful he is. Mr. Freeze is one of the few Batman villains who actually possesses powers and isn't just a deranged criminal. Of course, he is still a deranged criminal. Mr. Freeze in current continuity is also a deranged scientist, who from an early age seemed to have a fixation with the cold and cryogenics. This fixation likely existed because of key tragic moments that had happened when he was younger, also taking place in and around the cold, such as his father abandoning him and his mother's fatal injury and later death at his own hands. Freeze would become so obsessed he would convince himself that he was married to the subject of the first case of cryogenic stasis, despite the fact that she was technically like a lot older than him, Nora Fields. But a change to the timeline would make it so that this was actually true and that he and Nora had in fact been together before she was frozen, so she became his real wife, meaning their relationship was no longer considered one of Victor's delusions in main continuity. Mr. Freeze is not only powerful with his ice gun and unique physiology, which allows him to freeze anything he touches and create ice structures, but he is complex and unique in appearance, meaning we likely won't see him in the DCEU anytime soon. Not that I'm saying the villains aren't complex. That wasn't like a sick burn to the DCEU or anything, just to be clear.
And at 7, Scarecrow. The Scarecrow has made an appearance in the Dark Knight movies, however those aren't in the DCEU, at least yet. Until this point, the closest we've gotten is the Fear Gas from the Arrowverse crossover event of Elseworlds. However, that gas made some insane hallucinations that ended up with the Flash, who at the time was Oliver Queen's, speed to be useless, which would be incredibly overpowered when it comes to the rest of the DCEU. When Oliver and Barry were fighting, Barry was landing hits on Oliver despite not having his super speed, and Oliver wasn't knocking Barry away with super speed punches. This being used on a greater scale, like we would see Scarecrow do in an actual movie, would absolutely destroy the world, especially with heroes like Superman and Martian Manhunter. And we know that this is how the Scarecrow's gas would operate in the DCEU, because thanks to the Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover, we got confirmation that Ezra Miller's Flash and Grant Gustin's Flash exist in the same multiverse. Or perhaps the cinematic universe exists within the antimatter universe. It would explain the darker themes. Either way, we know that's how the gas would work, and that would be a little too much to handle in one movie.
Number 6. Bane. Bane is known for being one of Batman's all-around strongest villains, but let's not forget that Bane also brings smarts to the table. Okay, so maybe not if we're counting the Harley Quinn animated series version of Bane, but comic book Bane at least is known for also possessing a brilliant mind. A lot of people forget that about him. He was the mastermind, in fact, behind the death of Alfred, which was also part of his scheme to break the Batman in a much more all-around way. Granted, he also took out Alfred because his demands were not being met. He'd basically ordered Batman not to make a rescue attempt, but then Damian Wayne did make a rescue attempt because he didn't listen to the warning that was given to them, and so Alfred died by Bane's hands after Damian's attempt failed. Bane, being such a massive man of muscle, also makes it hard to bring him to life. He's not only a hard villain to write, but he's also a difficult one to cast and depict as well, because he just looks like literally a brick house.
Halfway through in number 5, Arkham Knight. Not only is this character loved by some of the people who played the Batman Arkham series of games, the Arkham Knight is a highly skilled military technician who possesses expert knowledge of Batman's tactics and fighting style, which can be attributed to the fact that he was personally trained by the Vigilante, being revealed as Jason Todd, a moment that we all remember, for better or worse. He is a master of hand-to-hand combat, martial arts, and marksmanship. The high-tech military-like battle suit that he wears further enhances his physical strength, speed, and durability. When Batman was ambushed by the Dark Knight, he was able to knock the Dark Knight off his feet with one punch. This absolute mastery of Batman's tactics would make him a hella good villain, however the amount of power he has would probably be too much for the DCU. They already had Batman fight Superman and win, so they would have to supercharge Arkham Knight to make it an actually interesting fight, which would just ruin the character even more than some would consider him already ruined.
Number 4. Ra's al Ghul, or Ra's al Ghul, depending on what you prefer. A lot of people prefer Ra's, I prefer Ra's. We can all coexist, it's a beautiful world. Ra's is one of Batman's all-time greatest nemesis. While he might not possess direct superpowers of any kind, like most of Batman's rogues, he is one of the most skilled fighters and has one of the most brilliant minds. Like Bane. I like people with brilliant minds, apparently. Too bad Ra's usually uses his brilliant mind to concoct all sorts of schemes in order to topple governments, sow chaos, and gain power the world over. Ra's al Ghul is the head of the League of Assassins and has come close to completely defeating Batman in the past, with him even successfully using Batman's own research during the Tower of Babel JLA story to defeat all of Batman's superpowered colleagues on the team.
Getting close to the end, and at number 3, Solomon Grundy. Solomon Grundy, born on a Monday. That's what the story says. But when killed, Grundy will return and be resurrected in the swamp where he died, and then because that's his thing. This sort of resurrection and recurring antagonist thing doesn't really work in movies. In TV, sure it can work. Introduce the character, then have them come back once a season for an episode or two. However, with movies, those are more often than not like one-time villains that are to be dealt with and then forgotten about, unless the movie is like a two-parter or the villain ends up winning. This kind of concept has to be taken into account when thinking about who would be too overpowered in the DCEU. Solomon Grundy would be one of those villains that wouldn't realistically be a one-time villain. Even if they brought him back for another movie with like a big team up of villains, it wouldn't matter, because he would die and then just come back again. The story would never be over. The threat would never actually be fully handled, and that's just the way the character was written. It's great for comics and it would work okay on TV, but in movies this guy wouldn't work in the slightest. It's unfortunate because I love Grundy as a character, but they would just ruin him like they did Arkham Knight and Doomsday. May I go on?
Number 2. Poison Ivy. Poison Ivy is one of my favorite characters in the Batman universe, period. And also coincidentally one of the most powerful villains I think that currently exists in Batman's wheelhouse. She is brewing up something huge lately in the Batman comics and has threatened basically the entire world on multiple occasions, but also has sought in the past to remind people of why she strikes out as an eco-terrorist, at times working with international science communities and political meets to fight against global warming and work towards preserving important parts of our ecosystem. However, while Poison Ivy will be coming to the Arrowverse on CW, we still have yet to have a casting for her in the DCEU, and this could be because Pamela Isley is just too crazy complicated and OP to show up there. After all, she has proven before how hard she is to take on in the comics. When she took over the world, it seemed almost nothing initially, not even Batman, would be able to stop her.
Finally, in at number 1, The Batman Who Laughs. Being first introduced in Dark Days, the casting number 1 in 2017, the Batman Who Laughs was Bruce Wayne from Earth 22 of the Dark Multiverse. He was a lieutenant of Barbados, and the leader of the Dark Knights during the first Dark Multiverse invasion, and later the infected heroes of the Secret Six. He convinced Perpetua, the original creator of the multiverse, to choose him as her lieutenant over Lex Luthor, as his vision was limited by his ego. Then the Batman Who Laughs continued on with his own plans, eventually acquiring cosmic power and becoming a bigger threat than Perpetua herself. Yeah, that's right, this guy ends up gaining cosmic power. He ends up implanting his brain into the corpse of a version of Bruce Wayne who had Dr. Manhattan's abilities, giving the Batman Who Laughs near omnipotence. Yeah, this guy is the definition of overpowered. And not only that, but he's an absolute psychopath. He will gut you like a fish while your family watches and then make them play double dutch with your intestines and think that that was a boring weekend. This guy is absolutely insane. I know I said that the DCEU is dark, but this is even darker than they would go. There, in my opinion, is no way that they could introduce the Batman Who Laughs properly without making the movie rated R or literally just being unable to publish it. It's absolutely insane. So yeah, I don't think we'll be seeing him anytime soon.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Metallo. Making his first appearance in Superman Volume 2, Metallo, aka John Corbin, is a cyborg powered by kryptonite. Sounds scary already. He's one of the oldest and of course most dangerous villains to Superman, and plot-wise, I think he would make a lot of sense in a modern DCEU. Robots are doing backflips and parkour now as they deliver mail, so I'm sure it wouldn't take long for somebody to duct tape some kryptonite to it and so begin the most intense round of tag anybody has seen. John Corbin used to be a con man until a car crash fatally injured him. Good news is he was found by Professor Emmett Vale. Bad news is that Professor thinks that Superman was the beginning of an alien invasion, so he transformed John's brain into that of a cyborg powered by uranium. Nice. Hip replacement? Nope, you're a robot now. Enjoy. His first task upon waking up was of course to go after Superman, but it gets wild, because once Metallo was given a more human look to go along with the kryptonite heart, he took out Professor Vale, his own creator. He didn't see a use for Vale after his upgrade, which that's pretty terrifying. I'm here for this plan. Just wrap some kryptonite around a pigeon and send him. That would also probably work too. Number 9, Bridgewater. His name is entirely different, but Bridgewater is the best translation we have. He first appeared in Superman Confidential issue 1. He was observing as Kal-El was launched towards Earth from that dying Krypton. He was a little too close to the action because after being caught in that explosion, Bridgewater was fused to a giant boulder made of kryptonite. So when he too arrived to Earth later, crash landed in Tibet, monks worshipped this physical form as a holy object. Of course, they're like the world's biggest gemstone, let's do it. But eventually, crime lord Anthony Gallo came along and wanted to control it. But Bridgewater used his powers to mentally control Gallo. How the tables have turned. He eventually met Superman in Metropolis, and that's when he offered Kal-El a chance to see his true heritage for the first time in his adult life. He explained his birth and what happened to Krypton to make it fall, but in turn, Superman now had to throw on a lead suit and fly Bridgewater's containment ore into the sun, finally freeing him from that prison. I can see Bridgewater being a villain for the most part of a DCEU film, and then in usual superhero fashion at the end, turns out he's just an alien in need. He was just misunderstood. Just a classic misunderstood alien like E.T.
Alright, at number 8, we've got Poison Ivy. This villain needs to be introduced into the DCEU, and there's some chatter online that this is basically inevitable. Not only is the villain just a hugely prominent player across the Batman universe, but her appearance could also have a pretty interesting social commentary on the state of the world. Poison Ivy is an eco-terrorist, for those of you who don't know, using her hybridized plant DNA to keep Batman and other heroes at bay. And if she were portrayed in a modern DC movie, I think it would be really cool to see how the climate change discussion could be woven into the narrative. I'd honestly be interested to see her as the central figure of a whole movie's conflict personally, because her influence is also enormous, having the ability to use her pheromones to control the likes of Superman himself. It's a good opportunity for the writers of a new Batman universe movie or episode to work in a timely and powerful conflict for Bruce Wayne to overcome. At number 7, it's Solomon Grundy. This zombie villain isn't exclusively a Batman villain, having first been a bad guy to the Green Lantern and also to Superman. Solomon first appeared in a 1987 issue of History of the DC Universe and based on one of those super depressing old 19th century nursery rhymes. His origins have differed over the years, but the general consensus is that when he was alive, he was a criminal type named Cyrus Gold, who was murdered in a swamp and his body left there to reanimate years later. I think he'd be a great addition to a future Batman film because with his association to Green Lantern and Superman, he can be used as a through line to tie a bunch of superhero storylines together as the DCEU expands. Not only that, but zombies also tend to sell pretty well in film and TV. Maybe this is a good way to bring DC zombies to the big screen. I'd love to see that personally. At number 6, Clayface. This villain would be very cool to see in a modern Batman movie or TV show due to both his backstory and just the way he looks. Clayface's backstory deals in the world of film, so it's no question that this character would have a ton of potential for a spot in the DCEU. I mean, Basil's descent into insanity comes from being replaced in a remake of a film he'd originally starred in. So maybe this adds a cool meta element to the DCEU. Fans seem to love how far Marvel went with their meta commentary, so maybe DC could do the same. Or more simply, this could just allow the director to delve into whatever the Hollywood of Gotham would be. And maybe that could open a door to commentary on real-life Hollywood, bringing us even closer to Gotham's realities as a city. Aside from all this, Clayface might just offer another cool opportunity for visual effects artists to go to town on his face folds. I'm a sucker for practical effects, what can I say? At number 5, there's Ra's al Ghul. This guy is such a huge Batman villain in the comics, I'm surprised he hasn't appeared in the movies yet. Ra's is hundreds of years old and uses any means necessary to change the outcome of the future to suit his wishes. He thinks he's doing good for the world by using extreme deadly force against any evildoers, which is a really complex motivation that kind of makes him border on Antihero. And that's one of the reasons why he'd be a good addition to the DCEU. With a lot of this list consisting of somewhat fantastical villains, Ra's comes off as more of a human character. And with his complex motivations, it makes him a writer's dream when it comes to adding drama to the script. It also might open a door for DC to explore the history of the DC universe by delving into the hundreds of years of Ra's past. The Lazarus Pit is also a great motif that could create some pretty cool conflict among good and evil characters in the DCEU. My casting choice would be Daniel Day-Lewis, by the way, since you didn't ask. That is if they can convince him to come out of retirement, of course. At number 4, there's Hush. This is one of my favorite villains in the Batman universe, and I think he'd make a great addition to the DCEU. Hush is a childhood friend of Bruce Wayne, also growing up very wealthy, but the difference was that Hush, aka Thomas Elliot, hated his parents to the point where he tried to kill them. Hush goes on to become an enraged villain wrapped in surgical bandages wielding 2 pistols who hates Batman. Now, he doesn't seem to me to be enough of a powerful character to drive a whole movie, but I imagine he could fill in a supporting role very well if given the chance. In Matt Reeves' Batman, there appears to be an Easter egg that might hint to Hush as a potential villain in sequels to come, as the Riddler is revealing to Batman that, spoiler alert, his own father was responsible for an innocent man's death. The word hush appears on the screen for a moment. And who is that innocent person? A reporter with the last name Elliot, just like Hush. Bit of a stretch? I don't know, I think that was intentional. So maybe my wish will come true in some form, even if you still don't consider Matt Reeves' Batman part of the DCEU. At number 3, we've got Scarecrow. Although he appeared in the Dark Knight trilogy played by a favorite of mine, Cillian Murphy, these movies aren't really considered part of the DCEU. This means that this villain is a free agent for future DCEU projects where he would hopefully be depicted in a bit more of a grand fashion. This villain has been around since 1941, first appearing in World's Finest Comics number 3, so however he'd be worked into a future film or TV show would need to be as grand and impactful as he is in the comics. I think it would be so cool to see how they'd incorporate his fear gas. Like, what would it look like to see the public or even Batman lose their minds to fear in a contemporary context? Like, what would an artificial instillment of fear on the public look like in a more modern Gotham? Perhaps this could be a good chance for commentary on the current human experience and give the DCEU a bit more groundedness. I don't know, maybe their MO is to keep things more detached from reality, but that's That's the sort of direction I'd like to see them go, personally. And Scarecrow and his abilities might just be a great chance to do that. Okay, at number 2, Jason Todd. Where has Robin been in the DCEU? This popular question seems to be answered simply by the fact that adding Robin might be too campy. The sidekick trope could come off as seeming a bit too old-fashioned, and this might just be what's holding the folks in charge from making it happen. But whatever you think of Jason Todd, he is the Robin that I think could ground the character in a contemporary setting, considering his darker look, motivations, and insecurities. This also opens the door to build a strong through line in a TV series or set of films. I mean, the event of Jason's death at the hands of the Joker is pretty powerful, and if done right, could also build up to a really sweet resurrection in a later sequel or episode. Robin doesn't have to be this quick-witted, bright-eyed sidekick. He can be dark, he can be vengeful, and he can add some really great drama to any DCEU project with his complex relationship to Batman. And if you're thinking, no Ben, it should be Damian Wayne or Tim Drake, well, Damian, as much as I'd love to see him too, would require Batman to be old enough to have a son. And Tim Drake, he's awesome in the comics, but he just doesn't have that dark edge that Jason Todd does. And as for Stephanie Brown, okay, fine, she'd be cool too. Either one. And finally, at number 1, it's Mr. Freeze. Where has Mr. Freeze been? He hasn't even been alluded to or hinted at all, other than Matt Reeves suggesting that he might be interested in exploring the character for a Batman sequel. There's been really no talk of him for the DCEU. Maybe Arnold Schwarzenegger's portrayal scared producers away from considering him because of how silly he can come across, but I really think this character could pose an awesome challenge to see how he could be toned down and modernized for a new appearance. I love this character. He's one of the most nostalgic villains for me, and his backstory falls into that category where you have so much sympathy for him that you almost want him to win sometimes. I just think the DCEU has a chance here to harken back to the early 2000s Batman and Robin nostalgia and make as much of a change with Mr. Freeze as they did with Joker or Batman himself. What would a toned down, darker version of Mr. Freeze look like? I genuinely want to know. Plus, it would just be cool to see how they would work with the visuals for the ice gun. What would the ice beam look like, and how would they justify such insane technology on a more grounded, pseudo real world setting?
Number 10, Blockbuster. Blockbuster might not be an A-list Bat villain, but I don't think I've ever mentioned him on this channel before, and I thought it was about time that we gave him a little shout out. We see you, Blockbuster, we see you. While not one of the most popular Bat villains, Blockbuster still packs a mighty punch. The current incarnation of the villain is Roland Desmond, who has reappeared in the Prime Earth continuity throughout the current Nightwing series. In fact, even though he started out in Detective Comics, he's now actually thought of more as a Nightwing villain. Even more recently resurfacing in Nightwing in issue 83. Blockbuster has also had many incarnations throughout the years since the character's first appearance as Mark Desmond back in 1965 in Detective Comics issue 345. Some versions have been tougher and more powerful than others, but all of them have possessed some level of super strength, durability, and stamina, usually granted to them by the Blockbuster serum, and often at the cost of some intelligence. However, the current Blockbuster does not suffer the same weakness, instead simply suffering physical pain if remaining in his transformed super buff state for too long.
And a 9, Condiment King. Okay, before you yell at me, hear me out a little bit, okay? Condiment King may just seem like a random dude who uses ketchup and mustard as a weapon, but you have to admit that would not fit in the DCEU. The DCEU has a much darker tone than the Batman animated series Condiment King was created for, and if he was in the DCEU, they would have to make him incredibly deadly for it to work properly. This guy would basically just use allergies as a weapon, and I don't mean like the oh you got the sniffles and your eyes are kind of itching kind of allergies. I mean like throat closes up and eyes pop out of your head kind of allergies. They would have to turn Condiment King into such a horrific killer that he would actually end up being overpowered and probably cause a lot of controversy. Even if it was just like condiments combined with acid instead of normal condiments, that would be absolutely nuts. You thought that they handled Doomsday bad? Wait until you see people's faces melting because they got hit with Dijon honey mustard and freaking acid.
At number 8 is Amazo. Amazo is a classic Justice League villain, and he still holds up, other than his name. His name is a bit corny, but he was introduced back in 1960, so what else would we expect? Credited as the very first android in the world, Amazo was created by Professor Ivo, sort of like a more humanoid version of Ultron, except he's created by a villain with the intention of making him evil. He's also got a very impressive power where he can absorb the powers and skills of others in his immediate vicinity, which gives this villain a lot of potential as a serious threat in the DCEU. Maybe he'd be more of a mini-boss type villain, but I think it would make a lot of sense that he would appear in the DCEU just based on his history with the JLA and his crazy power set. At number 7 is Despero. Another classic villain, Despero first appears in 1960's Justice League of America, the self-titled comic book series. So even though Starro is known as the first villain that the JLA ever faced, Despero is the first villain in the official Justice League storyline. So now, I'm not going to claim that Despero has the most original design. He could risk coming off as a pretty generic looking alien bad guy, but his powers are pretty impressive, with flight, telepathy, and mind control in his arsenal. He'd be like the evil, telepathic Red Hulk of the DCEU, which might actually be a cool villain for the League to be faced with in an upcoming project. At number 6 is Vandal Savage. This guy is known as an immortal caveman who has lived 50,000 years to the present day, and having taken part in many significant events in Earth's history. And honestly, I just love this backstory. I think Vandal Savage could be used to ground the DCEU in a way that it's been trying to do for a while now. With the Man of Steel, Justice League, and Suicide Squad franchises not quite hitting like the studios hoped they would, it might be time they bring in a character that has everything to do with Earth and the history of humankind. Perhaps they could weave in new villainous motivations based on his experience witnessing the evils of humanity throughout history, or maybe, I don't know, how the Earth has fallen victim to climate change at the hands of humans during his extended lifetime. I mean, he's been in support of some of the worst tyrants in the history of the world, so his connection with the human plight of evil could really bring a grounding presence to a DCEU project in a way we maybe haven't seen before. At number 5 is Grail. Daughter of Darkseid and Amazonian Marina the Black, Grail is a much more modern DC villain, and she could add a really interesting angle to the DCEU, partly because she actually opposes her father, Darkseid, on many fronts, which adds for some cool internal conflict within the villain ranks, but mostly because she could be woven into Wonder Woman's history due to their common Amazonian heritage. I think adding a villain who is linked to such a major character as Wonder Woman was a great idea in the comics, and if Grail makes it into the DCEU, we can not only learn more about the family history and therefore the humanity of Darkseid, but also about Wonder Woman's family history as well. At number 4 is Brainiac. This guy needed to go higher on the list just simply because he's one of the more recognizable and iconic of the DC villains. And I know what you're thinking, Brainiac is more of a Superman villain than a Justice League villain, but considering he has faced off against the Justice League as well, I think that qualifies him to some degree. And it's Brainiac. He's got to appear in the DCEU at some point. Even Zack Snyder has admitted that he seriously considered the villain for an appearance in his Justice League film. I could personally see Brainiac playing more like an Emperor Palpatine or a Baron Harkonnen from Dune, working behind the scenes with another villain taking the forefront at first, and then during a sequel coming out and showing his true power. But that's just me. At number 3 is the Crime Syndicate of America. So is it just me, or would an evil version of the Justice League make for a pretty cool and unique antagonistic presence in a live-action DC project? As much as the evil doppelganger trope might be an old one, it still hasn't been tested out on the big screen in any major way yet, at least in the last 20 years. And when Marvel brought Civil War to the movies, it worked better than anyone might have expected. And that makes me think that heroes facing off against each other in the DCEU would really resonate with people right now. And with the Crime Syndicate coming from Earth 3, it could also open the door to more interdimensional conflicts. At number 2, we have the Injustice League. As much as it might not make for the most focused movie, having a whole team of the most iconic DC villains would just be epic. And I know there's Suicide Squad, but I'm talking as like an antagonistic force to a main hero in their movie. But I digress. And I put this one higher on the list not because it would be easy to pull off, but because if it were pulled off properly, it could be one of the more iconic efforts in the DCEU. To be honest, the only way I could see something like this really working to its fullest potential is if DC builds up their cinematic universe for another 5 years at least, and introduces each project's villains in a way that gives them all enough depth and hype that an appearance by the Injustice League would be invited, but we'll see. Finally, at number 1 we have Anti-Monitor. Probably the most powerful villain in the DC comics, Anti-Monitor has faced off against just about every DC hero you could imagine at one point or another. Anti-Monitor is also one of the oldest villains in the comics. Born at the dawn of time, Anti-Monitor is the antithesis to his brother, the Monitor. And with Monitor being the one to watch over the positive matter multiverse, Anti-Monitor exists to watch over, you guessed it, the antimatter multiverse. The only other character I can equate Anti-Monitor to would be Galactus, mainly due to his sheer size and invulnerability, but also due to the fact that neither character has been given the screen time they deserve given their influence throughout the comics.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Giganta. Dora Zuul made her first appearance in Wonder Woman Volume 2, issue 126. She's a supersized villain. She's literally a giant, if her name didn't already tip you off for that. She was once suffering from a fatal blood disease, so in order to try and save herself, she attempted to transfer her life essence into the body of Wonder Woman, which I gotta say, great call. As far as vessels go, that's a pretty good one to use. Because Wonder Woman at this time was in a coma. She was being held at the experimental medical facility where Zuul was working, so kinda, it was worth a shot. Now during this process, Wonder Girl came in and interrupted it, so instead Zuul's life essence was transferred into a giant test gorilla named Giganta. I can't even say that with a straight face. So instead, Zuul's life essence was now transferred into a giant test gorilla named Giganta. Oops. Now of course, this was a no-go, so her next idea was to transfer herself again, but this time to a strong circus lady named Olga. The transfer worked and Doris could now turn into a giant because Olga apparently could do so before. I think we're okay without giants. I think anything with giants we're just gonna keep out. If it doesn't have a cape, then no. That's it. Number 9, Psycho Pirate. Psycho Pirate. Charles Halstead made his first appearance in All-Star Comics issue 23. He first showed up in the golden age of comics. He was originally an employee of Rex Morgan, who ran a newspaper company called The Daily Career. He wanted more success, of course, so he made the alias Psycho Pirate, and he started to use emotions as a theme for crimes. That sounds intimidating, I think. So the Justice Society would solve crimes based on emotions. That doesn't sound too powerful for the DCEU. If anything, it sounds a little boring where we're heading now. The new Psycho Pirate came out in Superboy Volume 6, issue 23, and he was much different. Roger Hayden can now control emotions, which is a big upgrade. Psycho Pirate is aware that the universes have changed, like he saw the nature of reality die and then get reborn, like New Crisis, Flashpoint, all that good stuff. He was just stuck in the universe watching it all fold and then unfold again. The reality created by Dr. Manhattan's timeline tampering had Roger as a member of the 20, a group of Metropolis citizens infected with Brainiac's psionic virus. So now Hayden can alter your emotions using the Medusa mask. He's getting better and better. The first mask was an artifact stolen from the Metropolis Museum of Art. That mask gave him godly abilities, and we see this in Superman Volume 3, issue 24. Now the second mask used was from Batman Volume 3, and that mask was more of a tool to help him channel his own ability to change others' emotions. Medusa mask or Majora's mask? Which would you rather own? It's a close one. Number 8, Cyborg Superman. Hank Henshaw made his first appearance in Adventures of Superman issue 465. He was a scientist, astronaut, and team leader of the Excalibur crew. He was joined on this LexCorp space mission by his wife and 2 others. But when cosmic rays get to the crew in space, their powers are actually quite similar to the Fantastic Four, only like nightmare versions. Terry, Hank's wife, was essentially the Invisible Woman, and then Hank has his face melting off of him. It's actually really gross. It actually ended horribly for everybody but Terry, believe it or not. Superman saved her, and the others, it was far too late. But in Adventures of Superman issue 468, it was revealed that Hank lived through, well, download. You have to back up your consciousness. He transferred his consciousness to LexCorp's mainframe, and then he took over NASA's equipment and then beamed his mind into the birthing matrix, the same pod that carried Superman from Krypton. So he's like mentally going through iCloud. He's like Siri, from hell, basically. So he was able to travel the cosmos and eventually learn about local life forms and their history as well. So he was super smart. He eventually came to the conclusion that Superman was evil and needed to be stopped. Classic. I mean, also, I don't blame him. He's like laser beaming buildings. I too kind of think he should be stopped. He recruited Mongol and planned his revenge, but after Superman died battling Doomsday, Hank claimed to be Superman Reborn. He looks just like him. Number 7. Brainiac. Another rival of Superman, Brainiac made his first appearance in Action Comics 242. Now this guy is a very specific villain. He would love to steal cities. Yeah, you heard me, not wallets or purses, cities. He took Metropolis at one point. I mean, this guy is just insane. He would use this thing called a shrinking ray, which does exactly what you would think it does, and he would take cities back to his planet. He just has a collection of cities. What a weird, I mean, try rocks. It's a bit more fun. Vril Dox. He started his days as a scientist, and then one day he successfully cloned himself because he needed an assistant, and who better to hire than yourself? There you go. He built the spaceship next and then traveled the cosmos, gaining knowledge and studying alien organisms with the help of his robot drones, but during these travels he came across Krypton while General Zod was still running the show, so he shrunk down the entire city of Kandor and studied it in his ship. Which is also so funny to me. He's just checking out like cities and alleys. He's like, oh yes, I see. Google Earth, my friend, Google Earth. I don't know, it'll save lives. He made a remote scout unit that believed it was the original Vril Dox, and then it traveled to Earth and took over the body of sideshow mentalist Milton Fine, whose stage name was, you guessed it, Brainiac. Number 6. Parasite. Rudy Jones. He first appeared in Firestorm Volume 2, Issue 58. He was once a janitor at the Pittsburgh branch of Star Labs, so naturally, he was involved in an accident that changed his life forever. Classic janitor in a comic book storyline. He's like, whoa, it's pretty wet here, and then he's like made of plasma. Classic. Darkseid remembered the Parasite who existed before Crisis on Infinite Earths when it was Maxwell Jensen, and he simply wanted Jones to become the new version of that. Under his influence, of course. He made Rudy open up a waste container thinking there was something valuable and awesome inside, but instead what he got was exposure to radiation, so he was changed into a bald, green-skinned, well, you guessed it, Parasite. Absolutely. Number 5. Hellspawn. Originally a supervillain from Wildstar Comics before Jim Lee brought him into DC Comics in the New 52, he made his first appearance in Wildcats back in 1992, but come Superman Volume 3, Issue 7, Lord Hellspawn made his arrival to DC Comics. And he's so scary. The Daemonites were developing autoimmune disorders, so he was desperate for a solution, this alien dude. And of course, he was also a hint of crazy, so his own people put him in a prison. He gained power from a blue flame on the moon Europa, and then in turn gained a handful of followers. He gained these amazing abilities, metamorphosis, phasing, super speed, super strength. He also looks terrifying and he's immortal, so that sure helps in a heated exchange. So he was locked up in this prison called the Eye, which later became the headquarters of Team Stormwatch, which was the planetary defense unit. Now when Harry Tanner set off an explosion, cut to 4,000 years later, that part of the cell launched and crashed into Earth in the Himalayas. That dude from Monsters Inc.'s like, welcome to the... No, not you, you're terrifying. No yellow snow cones for you, sir. Hellspawn later abducted Superman, they got in a heated battle, but of course Superman saved the day. We could do for this guy in the DCEU, another crashed alien, the people of Earth would be like, who is it now? Can someone deal with this guy, please? He's on fire, he's blue, he's on fire. Number 4. Super Doom. Coming from Earth 45, this Superman was also a project gone wrong. He first appeared in Action Comics Volume 2, Issue 9, back when Jimmy Olsen created a machine that turns thoughts into reality, which sounds scary when you think about it. You're like, I don't know if I want to do it. No one read my stuff. The gang decided to make a robot Superman out of this tech. They ended up selling this device to Overcorp, which made it into Superman: The Last Night of Tomorrow, aka the monstrous Super Doom. It just sounded like a bad idea. Even as I was saying it out loud, I'm like, oh, come on, Jimmy. Overcorp used him to take over the planet, but still, that wasn't enough. Super Doom entered the bleed space where he would then search the multiverse for all of its creators, destroying planets and other versions of Superman like Optiman of Earth 36 or Superman of Earth 42, but eventually he came to Earth 23 and had to go toe-to-toe with their Superman, President Calvin Harris. I'm all for this guy. We're gonna get some DCEU multiverse stuff going on. He could totally slip in. Number 3. Toyman. This guy we saw in live action before in Smallville, so there's hope that he'll make an appearance in the DCEU. Toyman, aka Winslow Schott, is considered a mechanical genius who, yes, is also a little mad. His first appearance was in the Golden Age back in Action Comics issue 64. On the cover, he's hopping over Superman by using a pogo stick. So if we're bringing him into live action, we need this scene to happen. The theater would applause, it would go nuts. He first designed an army of toy soldiers that actually shot knockout gas. Toy Story, but make it a horror film. There you go. The second version of Toyman is my personal favorite. Jack Nimble took Winslow's spot in the 70s after he retired. His outfit was much better. He dressed like a jester and he flew a little plane. A plane that he was far too big for. He kept his legs outside of the plane on the wings. He's just man-spreading like a true villain. Number 2, Mr. Mxyzptlk. This man of mystery made his first dazzling appearance in Superman Volume 2, Issue 11. He is awesome. Now at first sight, he seems like an ordinary dude. He's in the office with Lois and Clark, he's the new guy in the office, and right as Lois and Clark are gearing up to leave for their lunch, that random dude starts to rub Lois's feet. In the office, he's just rubbing feet, just the foot guy in the office. He has a coffee in one hand and a foot in the other. Normal office behavior, so weird. But it's even weirder when Lois agreed to go get lunch with that guy. She bailed on Superman, which is insane. She went with Foot Rub Ronnie. They go to lunch and they come back 4 hours later, which is concerning. And then at this point, Lois still doesn't know what happened or anything about this man. She doesn't know how much time has passed. She's oblivious to a gorilla attack that's happening behind her. She's in a daze, something's wrong. And then he turns Lois into a mannequin, like an I Am Legend. So what's happening? This is terrifying. This man is not into foot rubs or he doesn't work at this office. He's actually an imp from the 5th dimension. His real name doesn't even translate into Earth's languages, so we call him Mr. Mixie. He can manipulate anything and everything. He is nigh omnipotent. I think a 5th dimension imp would actually be great for the cosmic elements of the DCEU. Like I said, Marvel's getting all trippy with their cosmic TV show, Disney Plus shows. They can do this if they want, I'm just saying. Number 1, Manchester Black. Making his very first appearance in Action Comics issue 775, he's an English dude who ran a team of anti-heroes called the Elite. He had a horrible childhood, his parents were awful to him, so he grew up believing that the best way to handle a villain was just to take them out. Brutal. Little different than Bruce Wayne, just a tad. Superman of course wasn't on board with his level of violence, so he interfered with the Elite after they had started violently taking down their enemies. Manchester Black used his telekinesis abilities to give Superman a stroke, so he was evil and actually pretty powerful. He can read minds and manipulate them as well. Then after Manchester's death in Action Comics 796, his legacy still continued as his sister, Vera Black, took over the Elite. Kicking off the list at number 10, the Time Trapper. First appearing in Adventure Comics 317, the Time Trapper comes from the far future. He actually prevented the Legion of Superheroes from traveling into their future using an iron curtain of time. He likes to hang out at his home located safely at the end of time. How neat is that? Kind of similar to Kang. In his first few issues, the Time Trapper was seeking the Concentrator, which was a weapon that draws energy, any energy source in the known universe, together. It's also a pretty big secret as well. The Time Trapper pretended to be the commissioner of the Science Police and tortured the Legionnaires, although they said it was a test in order to gain intel. Now Lightning Lad knew something was fishy, so he cracked and spilled secrets, false ones of course. So this brought the team to actually figure out how to assemble the real Concentrator. And when an angry Time Trapper returned, he launched a plethora of dark stars at the crew, but luckily that Concentrator could absorb any energy source like I said, so they were blasted out of existence. We're good. The Legion lived to tell the tale, but we just got Kang in the MCU, so I don't think we need another Time Lord showing up. My brain hurts enough already. Give us like 5 years and then bring in some more time stuff. Number 9, Eclipso. Making his first appearance in House of Secrets issue 61, Eclipso was made from God's spirit of wrath. He's the living embodiment of wrath. It doesn't get more menacing than that, folks. He was made to punish the wicked, to clean the world of evil, of course, until the Spectre replaced him. Wrath was driven by anger, whereas vengeance, that required more of a discerning hand. So what happened after was Wrath's physicality was trapped within an all-black diamond called the Heart of Darkness. The Heart o' Darkness, kind of like the heart of the ocean, but instead of Rose tossing it overboard, a treasure hunter found it in Africa and accidentally split it into 1,000 pieces, and now we're all Each of those pieces contained a shard of darkness. So Eclipso figured out a way to possess people through these diamonds, and that first man being possessed was Bruce Gordon. Bruce was a scientist specializing in solar energy, and while he was in a jungle observing a solar eclipse, a sorcerer named Mofir attacked him with one of those black diamonds, and after that, every eclipse, Eclipso would take over Bruce. Unbeknownst to Bruce though, Eclipso would soon learn to bind himself to anybody near any shard that happened to be angry at the time. Nowadays there's a lot of angry folks, so this is bad news. The entity of wrath possessing anybody who gets upset, that sounds, yeah, just smile and wave I guess, just lie. Just lie and pretend you're happy, then you're good. Number 8, Super Doom. Coming from Earth 45, this Superman was a project gone wrong. He first appeared in Action Comics Volume 2, Issue 9, when Jimmy Olsen created a machine that turns thoughts into reality. All these thought machines and emotion machines, it's a bit odd, but I like it. So the gang decided to make a robot Superman next with that machine. They ended up selling this device to Overcorp, which made it into Superman, the Last Knight of Tomorrow. aka the monstrous Super Doom. Overcorp used him to take over the planet, but still, that wasn't enough. Super Doom entered the bleed space, where he would then search the multiverse for its creators, destroying planets and other versions of Superman like Optiman of Earth 36 and Superman of Earth 42. But eventually it came to Earth 23 and had to go toe-to-toe with their Superman, President Calvin Harris. I'm all for evil Supermans in a nightmare sequence, but Super Doom might be a little bit too much. I don't know. Number 7. Relic. Ancient enemy of the Green Lantern Corps, Relic made his first appearance in Green Lantern Volume 5, Issue 21. He's been around for a while, like before space-time. I'm talking like a while. Before all this, he was a scientist in his universe who believed that harnessing the emotional electromagnetic spectrum was a bad idea. He figured it would lead to tragedy, and given others on this list, I have to say, he was kind of onto something. So he thought all these other lightsmiths were drawing their power from a specific place, and eventually that place would run dry. Guy's a futurist, what can I say? So he searched the cosmos far and wide trying to prove his own theory, and he had universal support backing it. But nothing was jumping out at him. There was no solutions. He didn't really come across anything until one by one the 7 core lightsmiths began losing their powers. The only living being left after that war was a lone green lightsmith. So Relic then passed to the next universe and he was remade as a giant, kind of like Dor-Zul. We love giants. He was first found by White Lantern Kyle Rayner in the Templar Guardians. But he didn't want what happened to the lightsmiths to happen here, so he traveled to Oa where he warned the Green Lantern Corps that they should surrender their power rings. And they of course were like, no, get out of here, peace. And then in turn, Relic forcefully drained their powers and destroyed their planet. Either one way or another, I guess it's happening. Okay, Relic, sure. Number 6. Volthoom. Making his first appearance in Green Lantern Annual Volume 5, Issue 1, Volthoom was an ancient force that had the ability to warp reality. Sweet. He was originally from Earth 15, and after his world was on the brink of destruction, so him and his mother used the newly discovered emotional electromagnetic spectrum, which is a multiversal force powered by all life in the multiverse, and then they used this power to create the Travel Lantern, and Volthoom left to find safety while his mother stayed behind and unfortunately, in superhero fashion, died right as he left. This first lantern traveled for weeks through space and time in desperate hopes to find something to save his home. So he goes to Earth 17 and he uses the spectrum to resurrect plant life, which is cool, but then next he travels to Earth 47 and they use the spectrum to create beautiful music, also pretty cool. And then he went to Earth 3 where he met a sorcerer named Mordu, in which he creates a power ring out of a piece of his soul, that ring of course being called the Ring of Volthoom. You're not going to name it after somebody else, so it's only fair. He finally found Earth 0 where he acted as the law and order. Eventually Volthoom's mind was corrupted from the spectrum and he became insane. I feel like anybody who has a ring in general just ends up going insane. Like Lord of the Rings, it's like, come on. Number 5, Atrocitus. What a name! Okay, he must be a gentle soul. Atrocitus entered DC Comics back in Green Lantern Volume 4, Issue 25. He is the leader and founder of the Red Lantern Corps, the red power ring fueled by nothing else but rage. So since the death of his family, he's been after the Guardians of the Universe. His family was residing in the ever so peaceful sector 666. Krona, one of the Guardians of the Universe who I talked about in part 1, reprogrammed Manhunters to extinguish life. So when they all went nuts, this was one of the many worlds destroyed. He was one of the 5 survivors left on Sector 666, so together they became the 5 Inversions. They soon became known as the Empire of Tears, which sounds like a punk rock boy band, but in reality they were performing rituals to see the future, like the Blackest Night Prophecy and stuff like that. Atrocitus created the Red Lantern Corps, but he's also really known for corrupting Sinestro. Number 4. Oblivion. Making his first appearance in Green Lantern New Guardians Annual Issue 2 back in 2014, Oblivion is made of Kyle Rayner's rage, fear, and anxiety, all rolled into one. Lovely. He's the physical form of all those traits, and he even believed himself to be Kyle Rayner. He stayed at this guy's apartment, and he even tricked Carol into thinking that he was the real deal. He has powers that allow him to shapeshift, obviously, but he can also teleport and project vast amounts of energy that match a white lantern. He can also create illusions of objects and people. He can make anything he wants. You're going to be very confused if you go on a dinner date with this guy. One day, Oblivion teleported Carol and himself to Arizona, where he used his powers to change everybody's appearance, and he even changed buildings all around him. No thanks, we don't want any of that in the DCEU. Sounds fun, but sounds kinda unfixable. Number 3, Mongol. The insane ruler of Warworld. Yeah, he's for sure making this list. He first appeared back in the 80s in DC Comics Presents issue 27. He was a Superman villain who was exiled into outer space by his own people. A man called the Archimandrite came along, took it over, and from that point on the planet was just a cruel wasteland. Mongol drifted through space, and over his cosmic commute he picked up immense powers along the way until he eventually arrived on the 5th planet of the Cygnus system, where the Martian race protected the Crystal Key. The Crystal Key was the only way to gain access to the planet Warworld. So Mongol kidnapped Jimmy Olsen, Lois Lane, and Steve Lombard in order to get Superman to punch those Martians out of the way. Martian Manhunter ended up freeing Superman's friends, but by the time everything was done, they were all so low energy that they still couldn't fight Mongol, so he got the key and teleported away. It took both Superman and Supergirl to destroy Warworld, but Mongol ended up escaping anyways. I think I like this guy, but he might be a bit too strong for the DCEU, but hey, never say never. Number 2. Kronos. If you do the crime, you're doing the time, but if you have enough time, you can plan said crime out in detail, and maybe you won't even get caught for that crime. Confused? That's what time does. David Clinton first entered DC Comics with the Atom issue 3. He's mainly a villain for Ray Palmer. Now, he was a criminal his entire life, but finally he was arrested, thrown in the slammer where he had time to think. Maybe a bit too much time, because then he reflected on all of his past crimes and what he would have done differently had he planned it better. And he used his skills and obsessions with timepieces to work non-stop in the prison workshop. So he learned about Crocs, time, anything, the mechanisms within them, all that good stuff. And when his sentence was up, he was released and then became a time-traveling villain. He used time-inspired weapons, like literally, he used an exploding hourglass or a wristwatch filled with blades instead of hands, and he also had a device that could literally slow down time. And then he started going by the new name Kronos. In the DC animated universe, he used these devices to go back in time and steal rare relics from the past. At one point he tried stealing a utility belt from the Justice League's watchtower, but when he was interrupted he made a break for it through a time vortex, but Green Lantern, Batman, and Wonder Woman followed him back through there. We mentioned a time guy on part 1, so part 2, we gotta throw another one in. It's the law. And finally, number 1, Grail. We finally got to see Darkseid in the Snyder Cut, but is it too soon perhaps if we meet his daughter? Am I asking for too much? I don't know. She's pretty badass. She made her comic book debut in Justice League Volume 2 issue 40 back in 2015. She was born at the exact same time as Wonder Woman in Divergence issue 1. The Amazonian assassin Marina gave birth to Grail in secret with help from Penelope and Menelope. Marina had to defend her child because Penelope heard the prophecy from Menelope, so apparently this child would cause mass destruction when she grew up. Okay, sure. Marina took Menelope out, so she wasn't really a concern anymore, but afterwards Marina left Themyscira with her daughter, making it the first time Amazons have left the island. In Justice League Volume 2 issue 40, Grail teamed up with the Anti-Monitor and declared war on her own father. Nice. Being a hybrid of an Amazon and a new god, she's got powers from both. It's quite intimidating. She's destroyed Wonder Woman's bracelets with Omega beams, and she can travel through dimensions by locking onto those connected to the Speed Force. She can literally hitch a ride through time, so there's no winning this battle, either in the future or the past. Guys, those were 10 more villains too powerful for the DCEU, but of course, there's probably so many more to talk about, so a part 3 is probably in the pipeline.
At number 10, we have the Joker. Now, I know he's already been portrayed in the DCEU, but I wanted to put him on the list because I don't think his portrayal should end with how he was depicted in Suicide Squad, nor should it continue that way. In my opinion, I think there's a good chance for the DCEU to redeem this character with another iteration of the character. Now, even if you disagree with me on that front, I still think that this character has gotten so much attention in visual media over the last 20 years that it might be time for other villains to get the same treatment. But if we're going to include Matt Reeves' recent Batman movie in this list, which I'm going to do for simplicity's sake, it appears as though, spoiler alert, a Joker character is being hinted at for a sequel anyway. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm very excited to see what they come up with, which is why the Joker still makes this list. But I also couldn't help but feel like this was a missed opportunity to bring an underrepresented villain into the DCEU, like another one on this list perhaps. Man-Bat. This villain has to be one of the creepiest and most traditionally horror-based bad guys in the Batman universe. This bat-human hybrid creature first appeared in Detective Comics number 400 in 1970, making him a pretty classic villain that we don't often see reimagined in Batman stories. He's kind of like Batman's Curtis Connors, if you will, being a monstrosity that was accidentally derived from unstable lab work. He even comes in and out of sentience in later storylines, showing a sympathetic side at times, since, after all, there is a scientist somewhere in there. I think it would be really cool to see how a director would go about incorporating villains so visually striking into the DCEU. It would be a great challenge for visual effects artists, and I'd personally love to see his close-ups using practical makeup instead of CGI. It feels like the DCEU has a chance to bring back the campiness of early 2000s practical effects in a tasteful way, don't you think? I think.
Number 8. Ultra Humanite. Superman's first recurring nemesis during the 40s, and yes, I'm even talking before Lex Luthor. Buckle up. This genius made his first appearance in Action Comics 13 way back in 1939. His real name wasn't known at first, Mr. Mysterious Man, but this man was gifted with one of the greatest criminal minds ever. He even developed low-level telepathy. He was a hard thinker, but his physical body couldn't keep up, and he quickly became old and withered, so he got other people to do his deeds. That was him in the old days. Now, Ultra Humanite in Power Girl Volume 2 is much different. Here his name is Gerard Schugel, same scientific origin, same failing body, yada yada. But if it wasn't obvious, this time around he experimented with some animals in his origin, and he moved his powerful brain into a massive white gorilla's body. We have Gorilla Grodd in the CW verse, so maybe we'll get a mighty gorilla genius in the DCEU. Sounds terrifying, never say never. Number 7. Solomon Grundy. Killed in 1895 and then tossed into a swamp. Rough. Cyrus Gold was gone for 50 years before he came back to life. We're talking zombies now, let's do it. He made his first appearance in All American Comics issue 61. Cyrus was having an affair at the time and met up with Rachel, the other girl, to talk about what they're going to do now that she's pregnant. So Rachel wanted money in order to keep quiet, and Cyrus wasn't on board. So Rachel's friend stepped out of the bushes, hit Solomon on the head, and he fell into Slaughter Swamp. Great name for a swamp, where he would then lay dead for 50 years. Over time, Gold's body started to mix with the sour vegetation of the, Slaughter Swamp, so he was just churning and turning into a zombie. He came back as this zombie beast with no recollection of his past life, so when he stumbles across a camp, the only thing he can remember when asked his name was that he was born on a Monday. Oddly specific, but we're here for it. The other guy who asked his name mentions the nursery rhyme Solomon Grundy, born on a Monday, could it be? And it rhymes, therefore it stays. Number 6. Emerald Empress. Making its first appearance in Adventure Comics 352, the Emerald Eye of Ekron is an extremely powerful weapon. Right off the bat, I gotta talk about this. It's one of the best to ever exist in the universe. It's similar to the Green Lantern power ring, so when Saria gets a hold of it, trouble ensues. Originally from the planet Vengar, the Emerald Empress was the most wanted female criminal in the history of the universe. Which, put that on a resume, that's a pretty big achievement. Her homeworld was the site of the long-dead Ekron civilization, whose secrets were supposedly lost, all for the Emerald Eye of Ekron, of course. The eye will do whatever Saria wants it to, and it follows her around and gives her the ability to fly and hang out in space safely. The eye fixes itself after it breaks, so don't think about hitting it with a big hammer and then calling it a day. The eye has taken down Superboy before, and if we don't have a Green Lantern in the DCEU yet, I think it might be too soon for the Emerald Empress to start eyeballing the League, perhaps. Number 5. Poison Ivy. Bridget Regan has recently been cast as Poison Ivy and Batwoman on the CW, so perhaps she could join the DCEU soon as well. Fingers crossed on that one. When it comes to powerful villains, Pamela Isley packs a mean green punch. She made her first appearance in the pages of Batman back in issue 181. Now she began her days as an only child to a wealthy family, hot start already, but by the time she reached college, she was studying botany. She eventually fell in love with one of her professors, Mark Legrand, and one day she went so far to steal some special herbs from a museum in order to help him with an experiment. But of course, Mark was the worst guy in existence and used that herb to poison Pamela. She of course became immune to all diseases and toxins after this. Those were her original origins. Now her post-crisis origins were even darker. Can you imagine? That professor this time around was Jason Woodrow, later known as the Floronic Man, made Pamela a test subject for experiments. So straight up torture in her origins. This made her even darker once she did get her abilities, and this time around she hated men as well. So she would seduce them with her powers and make them do the crimes. She once made her boyfriend grow fungi in his lungs while he was driving, and I couldn't think of a worse way to go. Fungi? I'm gonna throw up. Number 4. Killer Frost. Crystal Frost, the OG version, made her first appearance back in Firestorm issue 3. She was a student at Hudson University who fell in love with one of her professors, only he was married, so he wasn't really interested. Crystal, after this, was upset. She was rejected and now she wants to start hating every dude on the planet as well. Later on, she was a scientist working in the Arctic where she again was reunited with that same professor. Then she accidentally got locked inside a thermofrost chamber, and then in comic book fashion got the ability to project waves of freezing cold air. Cool, Frozone but with attitude. We love it. Her first goal was to take out that professor, but he was one half of the superhero Firestorm. So she was beat at first, but once she met up with the secret society of supervillains, she was able to go head to head with the Justice League. Louise Lincoln's version of Killer Frost was in Batman Assault on Arkham, and a good amount of those Suicide Squad members are now in the DCEU, so hopefully we see her soon. It could happen. She's next in line. Number 3, Barbatos. Also referred to as the Bat God, heyo, this epic force resides in the dark multiverse. Now we're getting more into the big guys, I guess. So the World Forger was set to watch over the vast universes, and while some of them held up in their own ways, there are some worlds that just were naturally unstable. So what do you do next? You get a giant stick and then poke them and push them out of the universe? No, of course not. You send a dragon to destroy it. That way the energy can then return to said forge. Not a bad gig. Now sometimes you like your job a little bit too much, you know, destroying planets and all, and this was the case for said Bat God. He ended up killing his master, and that was just the kickoff. He then had a real taste for destruction, and then he corrupted the Forge of Worlds. So now with the Bat God not destroying these worlds and sending that energy back sometimes, these worlds would end up becoming part of the Dark Universe. His journey begins with Dark Days, the casting issue 1, and it's mind-bending. Go check it out. Number 2, Cyborg Superman. Hank Henshaw made his first appearance in Adventures of Superman issue 465. He was a scientist, astronaut, team leader of the Excalibur crew. He was joined on this LexCorp space mission by his wife and 2 others. Now they hit some cosmic radiation and in turn their shuttle crashed. 2 of the passengers' bodies turned into cosmic radiation, then the other turned into a gravel spaceship part anomaly, which I gotta say, one gets cosmic powers, the other turns into a bunk bed Ben Grimm. That's not fair at all. Hank's wife Terry was one of the 4 hit with the cosmic radiation, but she seemed fine afterwards for a little bit. That's important. Hank's hair also only turned white, so they were both lucky, all things considered. The crew then went to Metropolis to use the LexCorp facilities and hopefully fix their friend and crewmate's cosmic problem. The team ended up clashing with Superman. They were all decaying rapidly, everybody's scared, so of course they're gonna freak out a little bit. Steven flew into the sun. He felt attracted to its powers and then flew into his own death, like a moth. All that cosmic stuff, he was like, and then he just disappeared. Hank manages to tip Superman off right before he decays, so they were only able to save Terry. Jim didn't want to live as a space shuttle rock cluster anymore, so he walked into a MRI scanner, just ended his own life. Really tragic stuff. Terry was now the only survivor of this cosmic nightmare, but in Adventures of Superman issue 468, it was revealed Hank lived through iCloud. Basically, he transferred his consciousness to LexCorp's mainframe, and then he took over NASA's equipment and beamed his mind into the birthing matrix, the pod that carried Superman from Krypton to Earth. So now he was able to travel the cosmos and just learn about local life forms and their history. He eventually came to the conclusion that Superman was in fact evil and he needed to be stopped. After Superman died battling Doomsday, Hank claimed to be Superman Reborn, and of course people bought it, because look at him. This is why you back your phone up, people, in case you become an astronaut and your best friend turns into a ball of space junk. You don't want that happening. And finally, number 1, Mr. Mxyzptlk. This man of mystery made his first dazzling appearance in Superman Volume 2, issue 11. At first sight, he seems like an ordinary man with an excellent beard and jawline. He's in the office with Lois and Clark, he's the new guy, and right as Lois and Clark are about to leave and go for their lunch date, this random dude starts to rub Lois's feet. Normal office behavior, sure, and then even weirder, Lois bails on Clark. Now she wants to go to lunch with Foot Rub Ronnie. So they go to lunch and they come back 4 hours later, and at this point Lois still doesn't know anything about this man somehow. She's oblivious also to a grill attack that's taking place behind her. So she's in a daze, something is afoot. And then he turns Lois into a mannequin. So what's happening right now? Who is this guy? This man is in fact not a hunk, he's actually an imp from the 5th dimension. Close enough. His real name doesn't even translate into Earth's languages, but we collectively pronounce it as Mr. Mxyzptlk. He can manipulate anything and everything. He's nigh omnipotent and he's into feet. I think this guy is way too much for the DCEU in any way. Guys, those were 10 more villains that kick ass. I don't think the DCEU is ready for these ones, but never say never.